The box remained untouched for the rest of the day. Henry had dragged it from the soil with effort, covered it with an old tarp, and sat silently beside it until dusk. Something about the way it had rested in the earth, undisturbed, yet almost waiting, unsettled him more than he cared to admit. That night, Emily noticed his silence at dinner. 17, sharp-eyed and endlessly curious, she was nothing like her father in manner, but deeply rooted in the same soil he'd spent his life tilling. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and asked, "Is it Daisy again?" Henry nodded slowly, still chewing. "And the tree. What about it?" "She won't go near it. I dug a little, found a box." Emily's fork paused in mid-air. "What kind of box?" "Metal, old, locked." Her eyes lit up, not with fear but fascination. "Did you open it?" "Not yet," he said. "Didn't feel right. Felt like something off." Emily was already pulling out her phone, fingers flying. "You know, Grandma used to tell me stories about that tree, said it was cursed or something." Henry frowned. "She said a lot of things." "I'm serious," she said. "There's this diary she gave me before she passed. I never really looked through it, but I remember her saying that tree was dangerous, called it the bloodroot." Henry grunted, unconvinced. "That just sounds like something old folks say to scare kids." Emily got up from the table and disappeared into her room. A few minutes later, she returned with a small leather-bound book. The pages were yellowed, fragile. She flipped through them until she landed on one lined in her grandmother's familiar cursive. "There," she said, pointing. 1937. "Mama told me never to go near the bloodroot tree. She said bad things grow from it. Said it drank something it shouldn't have. I don't know what she means, but animals won't touch the grass near it. Makes them scream." Henry leaned forward, taking the book from her. He read it once, then twice. "You think she was talking about Daisy's behavior?" he asked. Emily nodded. "And look, there's more. Saw a man digging there once, never saw him again. Sheriff came around, said he left town, but Mama whispered he didn't. She said the roots know." Henry closed the book gently. He didn't believe in curses or whispers or haunted trees, but he couldn't deny what he saw with his own eyes. His best cow refusing to cross a certain line, the ground soft and disturbed, the box buried and hidden like something shameful. Emily sat back down. "Do you remember anything strange happening when you were a kid?" "Not that I can think of," Henry muttered. "But folks always said the land out here had stories, never took 'em seriously." "Maybe we should," Emily said. "I mean, what if there's something under that tree? Something more than just an old box?" Henry shook his head, though not as firmly as before. Could be nothing, or could be something someone buried and forgot. But why bury it there? And why would Daisy react like that? He didn't have an answer. Neither of them did. But the seed of doubt had taken root. Later that night, after Emily went to bed, Henry sat alone by the window, staring into the dark fields. The sycamore tree stood tall and unmoving in the moonlight, its branches reaching upward like arms frozen in a silent scream. He didn't like the way it looked. He didn't like the way the ground had swallowed and kept that box. And for the first time in decades, Henry Callahan considered that maybe, just maybe, some of the stories passed down weren't just tales meant to scare children. Maybe some of them were warnings. The next morning brought a quiet fog over the fields. Henry woke early, his boots on before the sun had cleared the ridge. The box remained by the barn, still sealed, still silent beneath the tarp. He glanced at it, then toward the tree. Something gnawed at him, something deep and primal. The diary, Daisy's fear, the soft earth, it all pointed toward one thing. Something was buried there and it wasn't done with them yet. He packed a thermos of coffee, slung a heavier shovel over his shoulder, and walked back to the sycamore. Daisy stood far off, watching him from across the pasture like she was waiting to see if he'd make it back. He ignored the shiver that danced up his spine. As he reached the tree again, he paused. The ground where he had dug yesterday looked even more disturbed, looser. A wide circle of dirt that hadn't been there before surrounded the base of the trunk, like something had shifted overnight. He started digging in a new spot, a few feet from the first hole. The soil turned away in thick, dark clumps, damp and cool beneath the surface. Inch by inch he uncovered what looked like old roots, but they were wrong, too smooth, too uniform. Then came the sound. A hollow clang of metal beneath his shovel. Henry knelt and brushed the dirt away carefully. His fingers found the edge of another container, larger than the first. Rusted through in places, but still mostly intact. The air around it felt colder, sharp even, and his breath caught in his throat. He pressed his hand against the lid. It felt warm. He jerked back. That wasn't possible. The ground was cold, and yet the thing inside the box radiated a low, steady heat, like something alive. Henry sat back, breathing hard, hands shaking. He stared at the earth, then down at his palms. A smear of black coated his skin, thick and sticky like oil, but it had come from nowhere. He looked back into the hole. The soil around the box had changed. It looked darker now, wet and glistening. He took a deep breath and stood. A voice startled him. "Dad?" Emily. She'd followed quietly, standing behind the fence, arms crossed over her flannel shirt. Her eyes were wide. "I told you not to come out here," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. "I saw you from the window." Henry sighed. "Help me get this out." Together they worked the edges of the container loose, pulling and rocking it until it finally gave way with a sickening squelch. As they lifted it, a foul stench escaped the hole, like rotting meat and damp stone. Emily gagged, covering her nose. The bottom of the container cracked open as they moved it, spilling a mix of dirt and small, pale fragments into the grass. Emily froze. Henry's heart stopped. One of the fragments had teeth. He dropped the box and fell backward, landing hard. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at what now lay in front of him. Clean, ivory curves, broken and worn, but unmistakable. A jawbone. Human. The air grew heavy. The tree above them seemed to groan, its branches creaking as though bearing witness. Henry couldn't move. He stared, helpless, as the truth rooted itself into his chest like a splinter. This wasn't just some lost relic or forgotten artifact. This was a grave. And someone had gone to great lengths to bury it here, to keep it hidden. Beneath a tree no animal would approach, no child dared climb, and no neighbor spoke of. The realization struck like thunder. Whatever they'd just unearthed hadn't wanted to be found. And now it was. Henry didn't remember falling. One moment, he was staring at the jawbone in the grass, its empty sockets turned upward like they were screaming. The next, everything tilted. The sky spun. His knees buckled. Emily's voice echoed through the fog. When he came to, he was lying in the living room, a wet cloth on his forehead, and the faint hum of the old ceiling fan creaking above. Emily sat in the armchair, her phone pressed to her ear. "I don't care what time it is, Sheriff," she said, voice tight. "It's a human jawbone. We dug it up behind the north field. Yes, the old sycamore. No, it wasn't some animal." Henry tried to sit up. Pain shot through his ribs. "I'm awake," he mumbled. "You didn't have to call him." Emily looked at him, her eyes lined with worry. "I didn't know if you passed out or something worse. And if this really is, you know, then we can't just keep it to ourselves." Henry didn't argue. Something about that jawbone, the black soil, the heat in the box, it had all short-circuited his common sense. He'd buried animals. He'd even helped dig up old foundations, but this was different. By the time the sheriff's truck rumbled down the gravel road, dawn was breaking. Sheriff Dale Thompson was a thick-set man in his 60s, with a sharp gaze and a long memory. He wore the same tan uniform he'd worn since Henry could remember, though the buttons strained a little more these days. "Henry," he said, stepping out of the truck, "heard you found something you wish you hadn't." Henry nodded and led him out toward the tree. Emily followed close behind. The smell hit them before they reached the spot. Sheriff Thompson pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and covered his nose. "That's not just decay," he muttered. "That's old blood." The jawbone still lay where they'd left it, partially buried in the dark, slick mud. The sheriff crouched, studied it for a long moment, then used a pen from his pocket to lift one of the other bones. A femur, weathered, cracked, and far too human. "Well," he said slowly, "you weren't wrong." He stood and took a step back. "I'm going to need to call this in. Forensics, coroner, the whole lot. You two stay clear of this area, understood? Don't move anything else, don't dig another inch." Henry nodded. "You think it's from a murder?" The sheriff didn't answer at first. He looked toward the tree. "You know how old this thing is?" "Been here longer than the farm," Henry replied. Thompson's mouth tightened. "That box you found, where is it?" Henry pointed to the top near the barn. The sheriff walked over, pulled it back, and stared. Then he called for gloves from his truck and began inspecting it. He turned, holding a rusted clasp in one hand. "This was locked. Someone didn't just bury a body, they sealed it up." Emily stepped forward. "Could it be from that missing persons case?" "The one Grandma mentioned in her diary." Thompson's brow furrowed. "What missing case?" "From the 30s, she said. There was a man who disappeared. Grandma wrote about it. She called the tree cursed." He looked at her. "You still have that diary?" She nodded. "Bring it to me," he said, "and don't mention any of this to anyone else yet." "If what you're saying is true, this might not be the only secret under that tree." Henry watched as the sheriff paced slowly, circling the roots like he was measuring something older than crime, like the earth itself had kept a record, and he was only now learning to read it. The silence grew heavy again. Then the sheriff spoke almost to himself. "I haven't thought about Jonah Griggs in years." The name fell into the morning air like a dropped stone. "Jonah Griggs?" Emily asked. "Who was that?" The sheriff scratched his jaw, his gaze fixed on the sycamore. "Drifter. Showed up in town around 1934, back when this place was still finding its footing after the crash. Folks say he was quiet, kept to himself, but something about him just didn't sit right." Henry leaned on the fence post. "What happened to him?" "That's the thing," Thompson said. "Nobody really knows. He was accused of killing a local girl, Sarah Lynn Copley. Vanished the night her body was found by the creek, throat cut, hands folded like a prayer. They say he ran, but there was no sign of him after. Just gone." Emily listened, transfixed. "You think this could be him?" Thompson shook his head. "Could be. Could be someone else. The case went cold faster than winter. People wanted to forget. The Depression made it easy to bury things, literally and otherwise." She reached into her backpack and pulled out her grandmother's diary. "There's an entry," she said, flipping quickly. "Here, Mama told me the drifter never left. That he paid for what he did under the bloodroot. Said the tree drinks memory, that's why the ground won't let go." The sheriff took the book, reading the page slowly, his brow furrowed. "People talked about that tree even back then?" "More than talked," Emily replied. "Grandma once told me you couldn't get a horse to walk within 10 feet of it. Same with dogs. She said her brother dared another boy to sleep under it one summer night. He came home white as a sheet and never spoke again." Henry looked out at the field. "And now Daisy won't eat near it." Thompson handed the diary back. "You see a pattern?" "I see a warning," Henry muttered. "But what does any of it mean?" Emily hesitated. "There's another entry," she said, turning pages. "It's short. He buried something more than bones, something that never belonged here, and when the roots took it, they twisted." The sheriff stared at her, the wind lifting dust at his feet. "You think there's something else in that ground?" "I don't think anything yet," she said, "but Grandma believed it." Henry looked at the sheriff. "So what do we do now?" "I've already called in forensics," Thompson replied. "They'll be here in the morning. Until then, I want you both to stay out of this field." "You think we're in danger?" "I think we've stirred up something that's been quiet for a long time," he said. "And things that stay quiet that long don't like to be remembered." Emily tucked the diary into her bag and crossed her arms. "What happened to Sarah Lynn Copley? I mean, really?" The sheriff sighed. "They found her the day after a storm, body washed up near Mill Creek. Folks said she was seeing Jonah in secret, but her father was a deacon. Strict. She disappeared after church one night." Some said Jonah confessed, others said he never spoke a word. The sheriff back then, my grandfather, wasn't the type to leave things messy, but there was no trial, just silence. And the tree was already there, bigger than any around it. Some say it was the first thing planted here. Others say it was never planted at all. The wind picked up, and the sycamore's branches creaked like old bones shifting. Emily shivered. That doesn't sound like folklore. It sounds like something people wanted to forget. Exactly, Thompson said, which makes me wonder why it's waking up now. No one answered. But deep inside, each of them felt the truth twisting in the air like the roots beneath their feet. Something had waited, and they had just pulled back the cover. That night, Henry dreamed in red. The fields stretched endlessly under a rust-colored sky, the air heavy and silent. In his dream, the sycamore stood taller than ever, its trunk blackened, its branches dripping with something thick and dark. From beneath its roots, fingers clawed upward, bone-white and grasping, pulling at the soil like drowning hands in a sea of dirt. He woke, gasping, his chest slick with sweat. The clock read 3:03 a.m. Emily's door was closed, the hallway quiet. He moved slowly to the kitchen, poured a glass of water and leaned against the counter. Outside the window, the tree stood like a sentry in the fog, unmoving but watching. The next morning, he didn't mention the dream. But Emily did. I couldn't sleep, she said over toast. I kept hearing whispers. Henry froze. What kind of whispers? She shrugged, uneasy. Like someone calling from far away. Too far to hear clearly, but I knew it was coming from the tree. He didn't respond. The rest of the day dragged like a weight. They stayed indoors, per the sheriff's instructions, but Henry couldn't shake the sense that something in the air had shifted. The light seemed flatter, sounds more muted. Even the birds were quieter than usual. By mid-afternoon, his hands started to itch. At first he thought it was the dirt, maybe old insulation from the barn, but the itching grew stronger, localized to his left forearm. When he finally rolled up his sleeve, he saw it, a faint reddish mark near his elbow, oval in shape, no larger than a coin, with what looked like curved lines running through it like a symbol. He tried to scrub it off, but it wouldn't fade. Just beneath the skin, it seemed to glow, a dull pulse he could feel more than see. He called Emily over. You ever seen anything like this? She examined it closely. It looks like a glyph or something from the diary. She ran to her room, came back minutes later flipping through the pages. Here, she said, holding it up. This drawing. Grandma sketched it. Henry stared. It was almost identical. In her notes she'd labeled it the root mark. No explanation, just those words. Emily kept reading aloud. Marked by the root means bound by the curse. First the dream, then the fire, then the voice. One must carry it until it's returned. Returned? He asked. Emily shook her head. It doesn't say returned where. Or how. They sat in silence, the wind brushing the windows like distant breath. Henry broke first. This is nonsense. Is it? She asked. Because your arm is saying otherwise. He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped outside. The air was sharper than usual, almost electric. He looked out over the fields. The cattle had all shifted to the far south pasture, away from the sycamore. Even the birds circled wide, giving it space. That night the dream returned, but this time it was worse. He stood inside the roots, the soil around him like walls. Voices murmured above, not words but tones, long, low, sorrowful. Something brushed his face, soft like silk, but he couldn't see what. Then the whisper came. Return it. He jolted awake with a strangled gasp. Emily was in his doorway, pale. I heard it too, she whispered. This time I understood. It said the same thing. They didn't speak for a long time. The mark on Henry's arm had darkened overnight, now a deep rust color that pulsed faintly. It no longer itched. It burned. Downstairs, a low hum began to fill the house. They checked every outlet, every pipe. Nothing explained it. Henry turned to Emily. Whatever this is, it's not done with us, she nodded. We need answers. He looked again at his arm, and then toward the tree. The next morning, Sheriff Thompson arrived with a trailer in tow and a man named Warren Dill, quiet, wiry, and carrying a ground-penetrating radar unit. The equipment looked out of place in the middle of Henry's field, but as Warren began scanning the soil near the sycamore, the unease in Henry's chest deepened. Scans picking up more than just roots, Warren said after 20 minutes. Something big down there, flat, maybe stone, about 10 feet deep. Thompson crossed his arms. Cavern? Could be, Warren replied. Or a man-made chamber. Henry said nothing, but Emily stepped closer. Like a cellar. Warren nodded. A sealed one. Dry pockets around it suggest it hasn't been exposed to air in a long time. The sheriff knelt near the base of the tree. You sure about this, Henry? Henry stared at the soil. The mark on his arm pulsed under his sleeve. We already opened the door. We may as well walk through it. By midday they had shovels and picks working the spot Warren marked. The soil became denser as they dug, thick with black clay and twisted with roots. Then they hit something hard, stone, a flat slab about 6 feet across, rimmed with metal bolts along the edges. It took all 3 men to clear the top of it, revealing worn etchings barely visible beneath moss and grime. Symbols, crooked and looping, spread across the surface in a language none of them recognized. Emily ran her hand lightly over the stone. It's like the drawings in the diary. Warren tapped the edge. This isn't just buried. It's sealed. They pried the slab loose with crowbars, inch by inch, until it gave a sudden pop, releasing a burst of stale, dry air that smelled like mildew and ash. A dark hole yawned beneath them. Flashlights in hand, Henry and Thompson descended first. A short stone shaft led downward into a wide, low chamber. The air was thick, silent, dead. Emily followed close behind. The room was round, lined with stone walls carved into strange geometric reliefs. Symbols everywhere, some painted, others burned into the rock. In the center sat a raised stone platform like an altar, its surface cracked and dark-stained. Heavy iron shackles dangled from each corner. Emily's breath caught. This was used. Not for storage, Thompson said, eyes scanning the walls. Behind the altar, a second alcove opened into a smaller recess. Bones lay in careful arrangements, some human, some not. Skulls stacked along the wall, jawless. The smell was old, but strong. Emily shined her light higher and gasped. A large mural covered the back wall, painted in deep ochre and black. It depicted a figure, long-limbed, faceless, reaching from beneath the earth, wrapped in tree roots like chains. People stood around it, arms raised in either worship or fear. Below the mural, etched in crude lettering, was a phrase, "The blood feeds, the roots remember, the soil binds." Henry stepped back. The mark on his arm pulsed again, sharper now, painful. He pressed his hand against it. "What is this place?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thompson looked around slowly. This isn't just a hiding spot. This was a ritual chamber. Warren knelt beside the altar, brushing dust from its edges. There's more carvings here. Looks like tally marks, dozens, maybe hundreds. Henry felt his stomach twist. This was a prison, or a shrine, Emily added. Silence settled thick again. The sheriff exhaled. Whatever they did here, they wanted it forgotten, but it didn't stay buried. Henry stared at the mural, at the faceless figure reaching from beneath the roots. His thoughts echoed with the words from the dream. Return it. And for the first time he wondered if they were too late. That evening, the house was filled with a quiet that weighed on Henry's chest like a stone. He sat at the dining table with the diary open in front of him, fingers tracing the brittle pages. Emily stood near the window, staring out into the night, where the sycamore loomed, lit faintly by the porch light. "I think she knew," Henry said. "Grandma." He nodded. "About what's under the tree?" "About what they did." Emily turned. "She said your father never spoke about the war, but maybe it wasn't the war that haunted him." Henry flipped to a marked page. "Listen to this. Papa came in covered in dirt again. Said it was the last time. Said no one else had to go. Mama asked if it screamed and he didn't answer. Emily moved closer, eyes scanning the words. That's not a metaphor, is it? No, Henry replied. I don't think it is. I think my grandfather, your great-grandfather, was part of whatever happened under that tree. Emily sat down slowly. You think he helped bury people? Or something worse? He hesitated. Maybe they weren't just burying victims. Maybe they were trying to bury the thing itself. A silence stretched between them. I always wondered why this land never sold, Henry continued. Why no one built near the tree? We had offers over the years, but my dad refused everyone, even when times were hard. Because they were hiding something. He nodded. Something they thought would stay buried if no one ever came close again. Emily opened the back of the diary, where loose scraps were folded and tucked between pages. One of them was a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1937. The headline read, 5 men disappear overnight, sheriff silent. She laid it flat. This must be the lynch mob Grandma mentioned. Henry scanned it. They went after Jonah. No trial, no witnesses. Then they vanished. Emily tapped the margins. And the sheriff never commented. Probably covered it up. They buried them. Or maybe... Whatever they summoned took them. Henry stared down at the clipping. You think Jonah Griggs was innocent? I think he may not have been the one they needed to fear. She pulled out another slip, an old photo, grainy, black and white. A group of men in front of the sycamore holding tools, faces stiff with something that looked more like dread than pride. My grandfather's in this, Henry said quietly. That's him. And that's the same symbol that's on your arm. Emily pointed to a faint marking painted on the tree's trunk behind them in the photo. It was there even then. Henry stood abruptly. We need to show this to Thompson. Emily hesitated. Should we? What do you mean? What if he already knows? Henry blinked. Do you think the sheriff's involved? Not now, but maybe his grandfather was. He said his family's been in law enforcement here for generations. What if the silence isn't just about forgetting? What if it's about protecting? Henry sat back down, slower this time. I never wanted to believe this land carried a curse, but everything points to it. And if my family was part of that, if we helped bury something that's not done with us, Emily touched his arm gently. We can't change the past, but maybe we can stop whatever's waking now. He looked at her, then back at the photo, then to the diary. Each piece another brick in a wall built long ago to seal away guilt, fear, and something far more ancient. They didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Outside, the wind stirred and the sycamore creaked, but beneath it, in the soil they had disturbed, something had begun to breathe again. The following morning broke without sunlight. Thick, low-hanging clouds pressed against the sky, casting a dull, red-tinged glow across the fields. It was like dawn had been swallowed whole, and something foreign had taken its place. Emily stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Henry joined her, holding coffee he'd forgotten to sip. The sycamore loomed darker than usual. You smell that? He asked. Emily nodded. Ozone, and something burned. They stepped into the field, Daisy nowhere to be seen. The air was thick, unnatural, heavier with every breath. As they approached the tree, Henry stopped. The bark had changed. Wet streaks ran down its trunk, dark and glistening like pitch. It's bleeding, Emily whispered. Thin streams oozed from the deep grooves in the bark, pooling into the roots below. The ground at its base looked warped, sunken like a shallow pit, pulsing as if something breathed beneath it. Henry took a step closer, then froze. The symbol on his arm burned so hot he gasped. He yanked back his sleeve, revealing the mark now raised, darker, twitching beneath the skin like something alive. We need to go, Emily said. Now. They turned back toward the house, but the sky cracked with thunder, sudden and violent. Rain began to fall, not in drops, but in sheets, pounding the earth with rhythmic fury. And in the storm's center, a sound rose, a low, guttural moan that didn't belong to wind or wood. It came from the tree. They ran. Inside, the lights flickered, A burst of static surged through the kitchen radio, though it wasn't plugged in. It hissed, then spoke, not in language, but in pulses of noise that carried intention. The pitch grew higher, a frequency that made Henry's nose bleed, and Emily dropped to her knees. Then it stopped. Everything went still. Outside, the storm vanished as suddenly as it came. Emily crawled to her feet, shaken. What was that? Henry couldn't speak. His hands trembled uncontrollably, and the burn on his arm had spread to his shoulder. They checked on the animals, most of them huddled in corners, wide-eyed and restless. One of the calves had gouged its stall wall with its hooves until the wood splintered. Blood pooled under its legs. The pigs refused food. Chickens lay motionless, eyes open. Later, as dusk neared, the air shifted again. The sunset burned a deep crimson, casting long shadows that bent strangely, too sharp, too alive. The sycamore was lit like a monument, its bark still weeping, the black sap now covering its roots like armor. Emily grabbed the diary. There's one more entry, look. She pointed to the last page. The handwriting was frantic, slanted, almost carved into the paper. He returned it too late. The tree remembered. The land will open. The blood is not enough. It wants voice. Henry read the words aloud. It wants voice. What does that mean? As if in answer, a sound rose from the fields, not thunder, not wind. A voice. It called Henry's name, faint, distant, yet unmistakable. He looked at Emily, pale as ash. Did you hear? Yes. It came again, this time louder. Henry. The ground shook. The sycamore groaned, the trunk bending slightly, unnaturally, like something straining beneath it. The wind screamed, then fell silent. From within the earth a long cracking sound echoed across the land. A root snapped above ground, then another, and then nothing. Stillness. But they both knew without a doubt that something had awakened. The land no longer slept. They didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside brought them to the edge. Branches scraping glass, floorboards creaking beneath old weight, distant groans that could have been wind or something older. Just after 3 a.m., the mark on Henry's arm flared. It wasn't a gradual burn. It ignited all at once, searing hot. A heat so violent he screamed and dropped to his knees. Emily rushed to him, pulling back his sleeve. The mark had changed shape. What had once been a single glyph had expanded, now forming a circular pattern, jagged with sharp lines pointing inward. Emily backed away. It's forming something, Henry gasped. It's calling. He didn't know what made him say it, but the word didn't feel like his own. At sunrise they returned to the tree. The earth beneath it had cracked open, a narrow crevice yawning along the roots. It hadn't been there yesterday. Henry stood over it, the pain in his arm pulsing like a beacon. I think it wants something back, he said. Emily pointed at the top by the barn. The first box. They hadn't touched it since that day. Henry unwrapped it with trembling hands. The metal had darkened further, nearly black now, and the edges warped. He lifted the lid slowly. Inside, buried in damp dirt and ash, was something small, wrapped in rotted cloth. He reached in and uncovered it. A carved idol. Bone, maybe ivory, its form grotesque and distorted, a human shape twisted by unnatural proportions, hollow eyes, elongated limbs, and a wide mouth forever screaming. Symbols like those on his arm were etched deep into its surface. Emily inhaled sharply. That's it. That's what the diary meant, the cursed object. Henry felt a pull in his gut, something primal. The idol was heavy for its size, hot to the touch. When he held it, the wind died. Emily flipped through the diary. There's a passage. Grandma wrote, "It was carved from the first death. The soil took it, but it did not consume. It must be returned to its origin or it will call and consume anew." Henry's grip tightened. The chamber. She nodded. The altar. They didn't speak further. By noon they stood once more at the mouth of the hidden chamber, flashlights in hand. The air was different now, thicker, weighted like a tomb sealing itself behind them. Every step down the shaft echoed like a warning. The chamber hadn't changed, but the temperature had. A deep, unnatural cold pressed into their skin. As they approached the altar, the idol began to hum in Henry's hands, a low, bone-deep vibration that made his teeth ache. Emily read from the diary again. Place it with words. Return it not as man, but as memory. Seal it with breath, not with stone. I don't understand, Henry said. Seal it with breath? Emily looked at him. Maybe. It needs more than placement. Maybe someone has to speak for it, or was give voice to what was taken. Henry stepped forward. The altar felt taller now, more imposing. He laid the idol on the cracked surface. The stone groaned. The room grew darker, though the lights didn't dim. The symbols on the walls began to shimmer. Then the whisper came again. Return. Remember. Remain. Emily's voice broke. It's not enough. The idol began to vibrate violently, threatening to fall. Henry reached out, both hands on it, and suddenly the pain in his arm surged, and the mark bled. He gritted his teeth. Tell me what you want. The room answered. A flash, visions, memories not his own, faces screaming, roots wrapping around bodies, men chanting. The idol held above the altar. A life given. A mouth silenced. A silence broken. Henry stumbled back, gasping. The mark on his arm now glowed. It wants to be kept, he whispered, but not by stone. By someone. Emily looked at him, terrified. What does that mean? He met her eyes, the truth sinking in. One of us has to stay. Emily stood frozen, the words echoing like a verdict through the chamber. One of us has to stay. Henry's voice was low, hollow, as if spoken by someone else. He didn't blink. The idol sat motionless on the altar now, but the room around them shifted, walls seeming to pulse like muscle, breathing in the dark. No, she said. No, we're not doing that. There has to be another way. He looked at her, eyes tired. There isn't. You saw it. Felt it. This thing doesn't want the object, it wants a bearer. Emily shook her head violently. We'll destroy it, burn it, smash the altar. Henry laughed bitterly. We dug up what they buried because they didn't finish the job, because they got scared. We stirred it again, now it's awake, and it's not going to sleep unless it's fed what it was promised. Emily's hands clenched. Then I'll stay. No, she blinked. Why not? Because it chose me, Henry said, pulling back his sleeve. The mark was no longer a symbol. It had grown into a full ring that encircled his arm like a shackle, glowing faintly under the skin. It's in me now. It won't take you. The air in the chamber grew colder. From the shadows came whispers, not words, but layers of breath and echo that twisted into meaning. The stone beneath them trembled. Henry, she whispered. I've felt it since the first time I touched that dirt, he said. The dreams. The voice. It's been pulling me down ever since. I just didn't know where. The altar shifted, not visibly, but the space around it seemed to sink. The idol vibrated again, and this time the sound it made was like a deep groan rising from the earth's lungs. Emily stepped back. I won't leave you here. You have to, he said. You need to go. Lock the shaft. Seal it again. Tell no one. I can't. You can, Henry interrupted, stepping closer. Because if this thing isn't kept in check, it spreads, it roots. You saw the tree, the animals, the sky. You know what's coming. Tears welled in her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't, he said again, softer this time. A sudden blast of wind surged through the chamber, though there was no opening, no way for air to move like that. The lanterns flickered. The stone altar cracked louder. A voice, not human, whispered, Bind or break. Henry's face twisted in pain. He fell to his knees, grabbing the idol with both hands. Leave now, he shouted. Emily didn't move. His voice broke. You're my daughter. I need you to survive this. Don't let my sacrifice be for nothing. She hesitated, one more heartbeat, then turned and ran, back through the narrow shaft, up the stone passage, into the light of the fading day. Behind her, the air roared. When she reached the surface, the sky had shifted again, clouds swirling red and grey. The sycamore shuddered. From beneath it, a tremor rolled through the earth like thunder in the bones. She turned back once, and the ground opened. The roots curled inward, swallowing the whole. The tree groaned, split down the middle, then burst into black flame. Flames that rose without heat, burning against the wind. She collapsed on the grass, watching as the fire consumed everything around the tree, then suddenly stopped. The earth fell silent. Somewhere below, her father was gone. But the thing beneath, the thing he'd taken into himself, had been bound. For now. Emily sat alone beside the smouldering remains of the sycamore, heart pounding, clothes damp with sweat and ash. The flames had vanished as suddenly as they came, leaving behind scorched earth and curling black roots that no longer pulsed with unnatural life. But she felt no peace. The wind was still. The sky above no longer churned red, but the silence was louder than thunder. She didn't know how long she sat there, frozen. A part of her expected Henry to climb out of the earth, exhausted but alive, ready to tell her it was over, that he'd done it, that he was safe. But the ground remained closed. Eventually the sheriff's truck pulled up fast, kicking up dust and gravel. Thompson jumped out before it stopped rolling. His eyes locked on the crater where the tree had stood, then on Emily. "What happened?" he demanded. Emily didn't answer right away. Her voice came out cracked, broken. "He stayed." The sheriff blinked. "Who?" "My father." He looked down at the ground, his jaw tightening. "He sealed it," she whispered. "It needed someone. He gave it what it wanted." Thompson rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the earth like it might split again at any moment. "You shouldn't have gone back down there alone." "We didn't have a choice," she said. "No one else was going to do it." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Thompson asked, "What did it want?" Emily stood slowly. "Voice, memory, a vessel." His eyes narrowed. "And what did it give?" "Silence," she said, looking at the blackened ground. "For now." Thompson walked slowly to the edge of the crater, peering down into the scorched roots. "I've been sheriff in this town for 34 years. I've seen drownings, overdoses, even murder. But I've never seen this." "You've seen pieces," Emily said. "Your grandfather covered up the first time they tried to bind it. The mob, the ritual Jonah Griggs. They didn't finish the job, they just buried the mess." He turned to her. "And now? We've bought time. That's all." The next hours passed in blur. Emergency crews arrived. No official report could explain what they found. The ground had collapsed, but there was no seismic activity. No fire scars in the surrounding grass, no source of ignition. Only the tree was gone, completely consumed. The bones in the chamber were recovered and labeled historic remains. The sheriff wrote his report with vague language and reluctant strokes. Emily gave no interviews, answered no questions. The idol was never found. She buried the diary behind the barn, wrapped in plastic, marked the spot with an old horseshoe. It felt right, putting it back into the soil, not to forget, but to keep the truth from spreading. In the weeks that followed, the animals calmed. The cows returned to graze, the calves nursed again. The mark on her father's arm never appeared on hers, but the wind still whispered at night. And sometimes in the middle of dreams she heard it again, that voice calling from the deep, speaking in echoes and soil and root. She never answered. On the last night of October, she returned to the crater alone. The ground had healed over, grass already creeping back where fire had claimed it. She stood in silence, the stars sharp above, and spoke a name to the wind. "Henry Callahan." A gust rolled across the field. The soil trembled faintly beneath her boots, just once. Then it stopped. She turned and walked away. Behind her, the earth exhaled. A month passed. The days grew shorter, the air colder. Autumn tightened its grip on the land, wrapping the hills in frost and rust-colored leaves. Emily moved through it all with quiet steps. She had taken over the farm, though she barely knew what she was doing. Neighbors offered help and she accepted it, but only as much as needed. Too much kindness made her uneasy, reminded her of what had been lost. Each night, She walked the perimeter of the pasture, ending at the spot where the sycamore once stood. Nothing grew there. The grass refused. One morning she woke with a sudden jolt, heart racing, breath ragged. It wasn't a dream this time, it was a voice. Emily. Soft, close, her name spoken with weight, like it carried the memory of 1,000 roots behind it. She sat up, blinking in the dark. Dad? There was no answer, but she felt it, some presence stirring beneath the ground. Not hostile, not calling her downward, just remembering. Later that day she found something new at the edge of the crater, a single smooth stone sitting atop the bare earth. Unmarked, cool to the touch. She placed it on the mantel, beside the photo of her and Henry taken the summer before, his arm around her shoulder, both of them smiling before everything changed. That night she sat by the fire with the diary once more. She flipped to a blank page at the back and began to write. Not facts or warnings this time, but memory. Story. She wrote about Henry, the man who taught her to saddle a horse, how to read the sky, how to recognize when the soil needed rest. She wrote about the jokes he told with a straight face, the way he always knew when someone needed space more than comfort. The man who never asked to be a hero, but who became one anyway. As she wrote, a warmth filled the room, not from the fire, but from within. The ache that had lived behind her ribs since that final day softened just a little. The wind outside shifted. A whisper passed through the trees. She didn't listen. She remembered instead. The next morning she walked to the crater again, this time with a sapling in hand. It was a young oak, one she'd grown from an acorn found near the edge of the pasture. She knelt and dug with her hands. The soil was stubborn, but she pressed through it inch by inch until the roots fit snug. She filled it back in, patted the earth down, and whispered a name as she stood. Henry. The sky was clear, the wind passed gently, and for the first time in weeks she felt something shift, not in fear, but in peace. That night, Emily dreamed of her father. He stood in a field that stretched beyond sight, the old sycamore behind him, tall and whole, its bark white and clean. He was younger, his hair darker, back straight. He smiled. "You did good," he said. "I'm scared it's not over," she told him. "It's not," he replied, "but you're ready." She looked at the tree. "What happens now?" "You remember," he said. "You tell the truth, that's all." She nodded, tears in her eyes. When she woke, the sun was rising. Light poured through the window, soft and gold. Outside, the sapling stood tall, not trembling, not bleeding, just growing. Spring came slowly. The frost lingered longer than usual, and the ground held the cold deep beneath its surface. But little by little, green returned. Emily watched it unfold in quiet moments. A sprig of clover near the barn, bees humming lazily around the fence line, the distant sound of frogs returning to the creek. She walked the pastures every morning before sunrise. Daisy grazed again, her gait steady. The other cows followed her lead, edging closer to the crater's edge with growing trust. The sapling in the center had grown fast, too fast maybe, but its leaves were healthy, its trunk straight. It didn't bend or groan like the sycamore had, it just stood. The sheriff visited once a week. He never asked questions anymore. They sat on the porch, shared coffee, talked about fencing or weather or the stubbornness of cattle. Sometimes silence filled the space between them, and neither minded. On one visit, Thompson brought a folder, thin, sealed, and yellowed. "What's that?" Emily asked. "Official closure of the Griggs case," he said. "County records updated, declared unsolved and sealed." She didn't touch the folder. "I thought people wanted the truth." "They think they have it," he replied. "Griggs ran or he died. Either way, they've stopped asking." Emily nodded. "What about what's still down there?" The sheriff stared into the field. "Some truths need caretakers, not headlines." That night she opened the folder, and inside was the original missing persons report, photos of the sycamore from 1937, and a single handwritten note on sheriff's letterhead from 3 generations ago. "We failed to contain what we summoned. God forgive us. May the roots hold. She placed the folder in the attic beside the sealed diary and let it rest. In town, whispers continued. People talked about the night the tree vanished, about the strange storms and the cows refusing to eat, but no one asked questions to her face. They respected silence in these parts. The Callahan farm became quiet again, not empty, just settled, balanced. There were mornings when Emily woke to birdsong, the wind through the windows, and for the briefest moment forgot the months of terror. The mark never appeared on her arm. The dream stopped, but she never forgot. She found a rhythm in the routine, feeding the animals, tending the land, patching the barn roof, checking the sapling. She began planting vegetables in the far field. Something about putting life into the soil felt sacred. One morning she noticed a boy standing at the edge of her property, young, maybe 10. Pale hair, bare feet staring at the oak. She approached slowly. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Is it true?" "What's that?" "That a man went into the ground and never came back out." Emily looked past him toward the sapling. It stood tall, its leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "Yes," she said, "it's true." "Was he a bad man?" "No," she said. "He was a good man who did something brave." The boy nodded, satisfied, and turned to walk away. She watched him disappear down the road, then turned back to the field. A thin cloud passed over the sun, but the light broke through again quickly. That afternoon she wrote a letter, not for mailing but for memory, to whoever finds this farm years from now. Know that the land remembers. The roots carry more than water. They hold silence, sacrifice, sorrow, and sometimes love. If the earth trembles, if the wind whispers, listen. If something calls from below, don't follow blindly. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, but if you must, go with truth in your hands and courage in your blood. She folded the note and placed it in a jar. Then she buried it at the base of the tree. Summer returned, as it always did. The days grew long again and the earth warmed. The farm was quiet but alive, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. Emily had come to love that silence, not emptiness, but presence. Like the land breathed with her, not against her. She walked the fields at dusk, watched the cattle graze, felt the wind brush her skin like an old friend. The sapling had grown taller still, its trunk thickening, bark pale and smooth. It cast no strange shadows, it spoke no words. It simply stood. One evening she sat at her desk and opened a fresh notebook. She wrote the first line with careful precision. Some truths are better left buried, but not all. She kept writing, not to warn or terrify, but to preserve, to remember. She wrote about the dreams, about the idol, the altar, the way the ground opened like a mouth, about her father's eyes the last time they met, clear, calm, resolute. She wrote about the sacrifice he made and the peace it bought. She didn't know if the thing beneath the earth was gone for good. Maybe it slept, maybe it watched. Maybe one day, long from now, it would stir again. But not today. And maybe not in her lifetime. When she finished the last page, she closed the book, wrapped it in canvas and placed it beside the others, next to the diary, the sheriff's report, the letter she buried under the tree. A private history, stitched together in truth. One day someone else might need to read it. Later that week, a letter arrived from the Historical Society of Kentucky. They'd heard of the black tree that burned and wanted permission to survey the land. Emily declined politely. Some doors didn't need opening again. Some chapters belonged closed. One morning, as she cleaned the barn, she found an old tape recorder in a box beneath the workbench, still functional. Probably Henry's. She pressed play and his voice filled the room. "Emily," he said, his tone warm and slow, "if you're hearing this, I probably didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted." She sat down hard on the stool, hands trembling. "I never believed in monsters, not really, but I knew the land carried things, memories, wounds, and sometimes those wounds call out. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it sooner." A long pause. "But I'm proud of you. For staying. For listening. For knowing when not to run. That takes more than courage, that takes strength." The recording ended there. No sign-off. No closure. but it was enough. She played it twice more before placing it in a drawer. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, she looked out across the pasture one last time. The wind moved through the grass. The oak sapling rustled gently. She whispered, "Thank you," and turned away. If you've made it this far, then you know. Not every mystery has an answer. Some are just waiting to be told. Some exist to remind us what it means to be brave, to remember, and to let go. If this story moved you, if it left you breathless or made you wonder what sleeps beneath your own soil, don't forget to subscribe. We share stories that linger, stories that dig deep, stories you won't forget. And if you're ready for your next journey into the unexplained, click the video on your screen now. What we uncovered here, it's just the beginning.